Ruth, how overwhelming that must have been to be just really yanked out of your home.
Yeah.
And
especially in a culture where the woman's expected to know her role.
That's right, that's right. And that's what gave me the thought that Naomi must have been a fantastic teacher, a patient woman, a loving woman, because she took these girls and she had to teach them. They had to learn. She had to teach them. But they never really, at least you don't see that they ever really accepted the God of the Hebrews until Ruth was on her way to Israel with Naomi.
Yeah. Now, let's talk a little bit more about that. And when Naomi's sons died, and then she is telling the wives, Ruth, and then the other girl, just go, and what she thought was going to make them happy.
She was wanting the best for them, and she said, "Go back, marry a Moabite, and I pray that you will be happy." And that God will deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and me. Because she realized that these women could have been in her home resentful. They could have been glad to be rid of these foreign men. Now they could marry a Moabite. But they loved her so much that they were both preparing to leave their home and their family to care for her. But she talked to them twice. The first time they said, "We're your daughters, we're going with you." And then she turned around and she was distraught because she had nothing to give them. She said, "Even if I could marry someone today and conceive a child, you couldn't wait for him to grow old enough to marry you. Go back." Well, Orpah wanted to go back. She wanted to stay with her family. This was a big sacrifice for her. And when Naomi told her twice, that was enough. And she put her arms around Naomi as I see it. She hugged her, she kissed her, she hugged and kissed her sister, and then she went back. And that's when Naomi turned to Ruth and she said, "You go back too. Your sister's smart. She's going back." And Ruth said those famous words, and I love to do that because when I am doing it, I watch the faces of the people in the audience, and so many of them are mouthing those words with me. "Entreat me not to leave you, nor to return from following after you. For whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge, and thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. And wherever you die, that's where I'll die. And I pray God would deal severely with me if I would let anything but death separate us." And can you imagine, Naomi she's thinking, "I'm just going to go, if I get to Bethlehem, this is a horribly long trip, but I'm just going to go because I want what's best for these girls." But Ruth loves her so much that she wouldn't allow that. And I just see her just in tears. Not only because Ruth is going to leave her home, her family, stay with her, but she said, "My God will be your God." So Ruth is saying, "I'm going to be a Hebrew. I'm going to adopt everything about the Hebrews."
We could just stop here.
Yeah.
We could just stop here.
But the story doesn't stop there.
It
That's
doesn't.
the
There's more.
wonderful thing.
Yeah, one of the things I thought was very interesting about Ruth is that she seemed to, in addition to the amazingness that she already is, I mean, she understood some other things beyond what we've already talked about. The two things that came to my mind was she realized that she was not entitled to anything.
No.
And she realized it was not Naomi's job to restore her.
Right.
She was prepared to let her hurts just fall by the wayside. She lost a husband.
Right.
You know, I mean, and she's like, "I'm just going to go serve you and take care of you, Naomi."
Right.
I mean, those are huge.
Right. A woman alone in that world and that's why Jesus gave specific instructions about caring for, God gave specific instructions about caring for widows because they had no one to care for them, and especially a childless widow. If a widow had a son, then it was his responsibility to take care of his mother. But Ruth had no one. And she wasn't entitled to anything in Israel. And she knew, because Naomi, I'm sure, made it clear to her, "My family will welcome us. But you need to understand that most people in Israel will hate you because you're a foreigner. And they're going to hate you because of that." But they had a home because her family would welcome her home, even though they were angry when she left. And they also would have food because God had given them the custom of gleaning. And that was understood. The harvesters did not harvest the corners of the field, and if they dropped anything, they didn't pick it up. They left it. so the poor and the widows could come and have food. And so they would be able to do that. But Naomi never goes to the field. Ruth is taking care of Naomi. She goes out to the field and she gleans. And that wasn't an easy thing either, because the harvesters were harsh and the women were in their way. And you can imagine the poor, they have nothing but what they can gather. They're going to fight with each other over the grain, except in the fields of Boaz. And things are different in the fields of Boaz. And then there's Boaz, who turns out to be related to Ruth's dead husband. And so, you know, the women talk about this, the custom of the goel, the kinsman redeemer, because according to their customs, if a man married a woman and died without children, his brother would marry his wife and take over his land and raise up a child to his name. If there was no brother, the nearest male relative could do that, if they chose to do that. There was no guarantees, but this was an opportunity. I'm sure that as Ruth got to know Boaz, and he was a wonderful man, she began to dream about the possibility of him being a kinsman redeemer, but no hope. She knew that she was entitled to nothing in Israel, and certainly not a man to care for her, because she was a foreigner. But that's part of the beauty of Boaz. Boaz's mother was a foreigner, so he was open to that. His mother was Rahab from Jericho, who was also a woman, you know, in the line of Jesus. A woman, probably a prostitute, but she was a foreign woman, but she was a part of that. And so Boaz, it didn't seem foreign to him that a foreigner could be okay.
I mean, only a God-woven moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The other thing that amazes me about Ruth that I love, and this has just spoken to my heart many times, is that she was willing to be embarrassed for Christ. Yes. I mean, total fool.
Yes.
I mean, not Christ yet, because she didn't know Christ, but for righteousness' sake.
Absolutely.
Where, I mean, she was just, she laid herself out on the floor. She gleaned in the field. She did all these things.
That's right.
And when I read Ruth, I don't get the idea that she's shy about it. Like, she's confident about what she's doing. She shows no shame. No, I mean, just, I'm doing this, and I'm confident in this.
And I really see in between the lines when we're talking about Naomi, she sees that Boaz can be a kinsman redeemer. And so she sends Ruth off to go and wait at the threshing floor and go and lay at Boaz's feet. Well, you have to understand, women didn't go to the threshing floor if they cared about their reputation. And so here is Ruth's mother-in-law asking her to go and to do something that would make people talk. But yet she does it because she trusts Naomi and her love.
Wow, so what can we take away from Ruth? What can we take away from her story and really apply to our own lives?
I think that the selflessness of love, when we care about someone and we can put ourselves in the background in order to do whatever they need for us to do, that's a marvelous thing. And a single parent does that. They put themselves in the background because of the children. And they do what's best for those children, even when it's inconvenient and hard and frightening. I just see Ruth going to that threshing floor thinking, what am I doing? But yet she did it. Yeah. And that's what the single parent does. They put their children ahead. And that's a hard thing. And one of the things that, you know, that they need to learn is that God will honor that. God honors what we do.
He really does.
Yes.
He is so faithful. So let's go on to our next lady.
Okay.
Because we're about halfway through now. Esther. So tell us what's important about Esther. A little bit about her.
Well, we've got Esther, who is a young girl, a Hebrew living in a foreign land. Their people were brought there as captives when it was Babylon, and now it's Persia. And the very first thing that the first Persian king told the Hebrews was, you can go home if you want to. And 60,000 Hebrews left and went. They went back to Israel and they began to rebuild the temple, but many of them stayed. It was a long journey from Persia to Israel, and they were comfortable. There were people that hated them in Persia, but if they went back to Israel, there were people living in Israel that hated them too. One thing that the Jews have faced everywhere they've ever lived is prejudice. And so a lot